I know what it is to wake and feel the weight before you remember why it is there. To open your eyes and sense immediately that something essential has been taken, though the room looks the same. I have sat where you sit now, with a heart that beats but does not sing, with hands that move but do not know what they are reaching for. You carry a silence that is louder than any scream, a pain that has no name because it touches everything at once. The loss, the loneliness, the mornings that arrive like strangers, the nights that stretch into deserts where no voice answers. I see you. I have been you. And I come to tell you something I learned in the ruins of my own breaking. This pain you feel is not abandonment. It is an invitation you have not yet learned to read. There was a season in my life when I believed God had turned his face from me. My father had died. My teacher, the one who knew my name before I spoke it, had vanished into mystery. I stood in Kanya with the sun on my shoulders and frost in my chest. I performed my duties. I spoke to students. I offered prayers that felt like stones falling into a well with no bottom. The words left my mouth and disappeared into an indifferent sky. I wondered if I had imagined everything, if the warmth I once felt in devotion was only my own fever, if the presence I had known was a trick of youth, and now the truth was this cold clarity, this aloneness. I would wake before dawn and sit in the courtyard, watching the stars fade, waiting for something to move inside me. Nothing moved. The silence was absolute, and I mistook it for absence. I see now that this was my first lesson, though I fought it with everything I had. The lesson was this: when the noise of consolation is stripped away, what remains is not emptiness, but the bedrock of faith. God does not speak only in ecstasy. He speaks in endurance. He is there in the dark as much as in the light, but the dark requires a different kind of seeing. I learned to sit with my pain as if it were a guest I had not invited but could not turn away. I did not try to fix it or outrun it or shame myself for feeling it. I simply sat. I placed my hand over my heart and felt the dull throb there, the rawness, the longing that had no object because it was a longing for everything, for wholeness, for the lost thread that once connected me to the world. And in that sitting, something shifted. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, like the way dawn arrives, not all at once, but in gradations of gray becoming pale blue, becoming gold. I began to notice that the silence had texture. It was not the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of deep water, of a forest at midnight, of the space between breaths where life gathers itself. I felt God there, not as a voice or a vision, but as a presence so quiet it could only be heard when I stopped demanding that it shout. He was there in my very ability to keep breathing, in the strange resilience of my body that continued to wake and walk and eat even when my mind had given up. He was there in the way the morning light fell across the floor in my room, indifferent to my suffering, but not cruel, simply present, simply continuing. I realized that my pain was not proof of his absence. It was proof that I was still alive enough to feel, still connected enough to ache, still loved enough to long for more than this moment held. This is what I want you to understand, you who are listening with a heavy heart. Your pain is not a wall between you and God. It is a doorway. But you must stop running from it. You must turn and face it and ask it what it has come to teach you. I know this sounds impossible. I know you are tired. I know you have tried to be strong and it has not worked, tried to pray and felt nothing, tried to hope and found only more reasons to despair. I am not asking you to pretend. I am asking you to be honest, to sit with what is true right now in this moment without needing it to be different. The great paradox of the spiritual life is this: we cannot heal what we will not acknowledge. We cannot transform what we refuse to touch. Your wound is holy because it is yours, because it is real, because it has brought you to this threshold where the old answers no longer work and the new ones have not yet arrived. This is the most sacred place you will ever stand. This is where God meets you, not in your perfection, but in your brokenness, not in your certainty, but in your confusion. He is here. I promise you, he has never moved, but he will not force you to notice him. He waits, like a patient friend, for you to stop screaming long enough to hear his whisper. Here is what I began to do, and what I offer you now. Each morning, before the world comes crashing in with its demands and distractions, I sit for 5 minutes in silence. I do not try to pray eloquently. I do not try to feel anything. I simply place my hand over my heart and breathe. I breathe in and think, here I am. I breathe out and think, you are here. That is all. I do this even when it feels pointless, especially when it feels pointless, because this practice is not about feeling better immediately. It is about training the heart to remember that it is not alone. It is about creating a small space in the chaos where presence can enter. Some days I feel warmth. Some days I feel nothing. But I show up. I keep my appointment. And slowly, over weeks and months, something in me begins to shift. The panic lessens. The despair loses its grip. Not because my circumstances change, but because I am no longer abandoned to them. I have an anchor. I have a practice. I have a rhythm that holds me when my emotions cannot. I learned this aphorism in the depths of my sorrow, and I give it to you now. The wound that refuses to close is teaching you that healing is not sealing, but opening to the light within. Your pain is not your enemy. It is your guide back to the only love that never fails, the only presence that never leaves, the only silence that speaks if you will listen. Do not rush this. Do not demand miracles. Simply begin. Place your hand on your heart tonight before you sleep. Breathe 5 times slowly. Say, if you can, God, I am here. That is enough. That is everything. And tomorrow, do it again. Let constancy carry what emotion cannot. Let discipline become the hand that faith extends when hope is too tired to stand. I walked this path. It is real. It is possible. And you are not walking it alone. I must tell you something that took me years to accept, something that goes against everything the world teaches about strength and progress. I am not who I pretended to be. For much of my life, I wore the face of a scholar, a teacher, a man of God who had answers for every question. I stood before crowds and spoke with authority about divine love, while my own heart was locked in a cage I had built from shame and fear. I had failures I did not speak of, promises I broke to myself in the dark, patterns I returned to again and again like a pilgrim walking in circles, always ending up at the same broken gate. I was so afraid of being seen as weak that I became a prisoner of my own image. And the thing that finally freed me was not strength. It was surrender. It was the moment I stopped running from my past and turned to face it with open hands. When Shams of Tabriz came into my life, he saw through me immediately. He looked at me with those fierce, tender eyes and said, "Show me your wound, Jalaluddin, not your learning, not your reputation, your wound." I was terrified. I wanted to recite poetry, to dazzle him with my knowledge of scripture and philosophy. But he would not let me hide. He sat with me through long nights in Kanya, and he asked me questions that unraveled me. Tell me about the time you failed your father. Tell me about the desire you buried because it was not holy enough. Tell me about the night you wept and no one knew. At first I resisted. I made excuses. I intellectualized. But he waited, patient as stone, until I had no more armor left. And when I finally spoke the truth, when I finally let the words come ragged and raw, something happened that I did not expect. I did not fall apart. I became more whole. The wound, once exposed to light, stopped festering. It began, slowly, to breathe. I know you carry something you have not said aloud, a regret that wakes you at 3 a.m, a mistake you made that you believe disqualifies you from grace, a version of yourself you are ashamed of, a season of your life you wish you could erase. I want to ask you something, and I ask you to be honest with me and with yourself. What would it feel like to stop pretending you have it all together? What would it feel like to simply admit, I have stumbled, I have hurt people, I have hurt myself, and I do not know how to fix it? If this question touches something real inside you, if you recognize this ache, write in the comments, I am ready to stop hiding my wounds. When you share this, you are not just freeing yourself. You are lighting a candle for someone still walking in darkness. Your courage to speak truth may be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. We heal together. We do not heal alone. Here is what I discovered about the past. It does not want to be forgotten. It wants to be integrated. The things we bury do not die. They wait underground, sending roots into our present lives, shaping our choices in ways we do not recognize. I thought I had moved beyond my early mistakes, but they were still running my life from beneath the surface. I would sabotage relationships because an old rejection taught me not to trust. I would overwork because an old failure taught me I had to earn my worth. I would avoid intimacy because an old wound taught me that vulnerability is dangerous. The past was not behind me. It was inside me, living in my body, speaking through my habits, coloring my perception of every new moment. And the only way forward was to go back, not to dwell there, not to wallow in regret, but to return with compassion, to meet my younger self, to listen to what he still needed to say. I began a practice that changed everything. Each evening I would sit in silence and invite a memory to come forward. I did not force it. I simply asked, what part of my past needs attention tonight? And something would rise, a moment of shame, a choice I regretted, a hurt I caused or received, and instead of pushing it away, I would sit with it. I would imagine my younger self in that moment, and I would speak to him as a loving teacher, not as a harsh judge. I would say, I see you. I understand why you did what you did. You were afraid. You were alone. You did not have the tools you needed. I do not condemn you. I bless you, and I promise you, I will not abandon you again. This was not therapy. This was prayer. This was the work of redemption, not by denying the past, but by bringing it into the light of present grace. And slowly, the weight began to lift. The old stories lost their power. I could look at my mistakes without drowning in them. I could acknowledge my flaws without believing they defined me. God does not despise what is cracked. This is the truth that saved me. The Holy One does not stand at a distance waiting for me to become perfect before he will come near. He enters through the crack. He pours his light into the very places I thought were too damaged to be loved. My shame became the doorway to his mercy. My failure became the ground where humility could grow. I learned that transformation is not about erasing the past. It is about reframing it. Every wound I carry has taught me something I could not have learned in safety. Every mistake I made revealed a part of myself I needed to see. Not all of it was beautiful, but all of it was necessary. And when I stopped hating my history, I stopped hating myself. I became, at last, a whole person, not a perfect person. Oh, whole person. There is a difference. So let me tell you what to do tonight, because this is not just philosophy. This is practice. Before you sleep, light a candle if you have one, or simply sit in a quiet space. Close your eyes and invite one memory from your past that still carries weight. Do not choose the worst one. Choose one that feels manageable, one that you can hold without collapsing. See yourself in that moment. See the circumstances, the fear, the confusion. And then speak to that version of yourself with kindness. Say, I see you. I do not judge you. I forgive you. If you cannot forgive yourself yet, ask God to do it for you. Say, God, hold this part of me that I cannot yet hold. Do this once a week for a month. Let the past come forward in small pieces. Let it be seen, acknowledged, blessed, and released. This is how the soul untangles itself from yesterday and learns to live in today. This is how freedom begins, not with denial, but with honest reckoning and gentle love. I give you this aphorism to carry. The past that haunts you is asking for company, not combat. Sit with it, and it will teach you what running never could. Do not be afraid of your own story. It is the raw material of your becoming. It is the ground from which new life will grow. And remember this, nothing disqualified you except your refusal to begin again, but you are beginning. Here, now, with this breath, with this choice, with this small act of turning toward what you have been running from. God meets you there. He always has. He is not ashamed of you. He is waiting for you to stop being ashamed of yourself. Come home. The door is open. The past does not have to be a prison. It can be a path. There are nights when faith is not a flame, but a flicker, barely visible, barely warm. I have known those nights. Nights when the prayers I had spoken 1,000 times turned to dust in my mouth. Nights when the certainty I built my life upon crumbled like old bread, leaving me with nothing to hold, nothing to stand on. I remember one particular night in Kenya, months after Shams had disappeared. I had searched everywhere. I had sent letters, I had interrogated travelers, and I had received only silence in return. That night, I went to my room and locked the door and stood in the center of the floor with my hands open and empty. I said aloud, to the darkness, to God, to whoever might be listening, "Where are you when I cannot go on?" The room gave me nothing. No voice from heaven, no sudden warmth in my chest, only the sound of my own breathing, ragged and thin, and the cold press of solitude that felt like a weight on my shoulders. I wanted rescue. I wanted intervention. I wanted something outside of me to reach in and lift me out of the pit I was falling into. But nothing came. And in that nothing, I discovered everything. The mind, when left to itself in pain, is a terrible companion. It circles, it obsesses, it takes a single fear and multiplies it into 1,000. Catastrophes. That night, my thoughts were like crows gathering on a dead tree, loud and relentless, picking at every tender place. You will never find him. You will never understand why. You are alone. You have always been alone. God has turned his face from you because you are not worthy. These thoughts did not feel like lies. They felt like truth, cold and absolute. And I had no argument against them. I sat on the floor and I let the thoughts come. I did not fight them. I did not try to replace them with spiritual platitudes. I simply listened to the noise in my own head, and I felt my chest tighten, my breath shorten, my body respond to the panic as if it were a physical threat. This is the inner fall. Not the fall into sin or moral failure, but the fall into the abyss of your own mind, where all the old fears and doubts gather like wolves, circling a dying fire. I fell. I let myself fall. And somewhere in the falling, I realized I was not falling into nothingness. I was falling into something deeper than thought. I was falling into the place beneath the noise, where the heart still beats and the breath still comes, and something unnamed and unshakable holds the whole structure of being together. I did not climb out of that night. I surrendered in it. There's a difference. Climbing out means fighting, striving, using willpower to drag yourself back to solid ground. Surrendering means letting go of the rope, letting the fall complete itself, trusting that there is a bottom and that the bottom is not death, but foundation. I stopped demanding that God speak. I stopped insisting that my prayers be answered in the way I wanted them answered. I simply sat with my hands open and said, "If I could say anything at all, I am here. That is all I have. I am here." And in that radical simplicity, something shifted. Not my circumstances, not my understanding, but my posture. I was no longer grasping. I was no longer bargaining. I was simply present to what was, without needing it to be different. And in that presence, I felt something I had not expected. I felt held, not by emotion, not by certainty, but by a presence so subtle it could only be noticed when I stopped shouting. God was there, not in the thunder, not in the fire, but in the quiet persistence of my own breath, in the stubborn continuity of my own heartbeat, in the strange grace that allowed me to sit in the dark without being consumed by it. If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. Let me tell you what I learned in that night and in the many nights that followed. Faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is the decision to keep breathing when doubt is all you have. It is not a feeling. It is a discipline. It is the choice to show up, to place your hand on your chest, to say, "Here I am," even when you do not feel anything, even when the heavens are silent, even when the darkness presses in from all sides. This is the heart of the spiritual life, and it is the part no one tells you about because it is not glamorous, it is not mystical. It is simply endurance. It is the willingness to stay in your place when you cannot feel God's presence, trusting that the lack of feeling is not the lack of presence. I had spent years chasing experiences, seeking visions and ecstasies and moments of divine intoxication. And those moments came, and they were beautiful, and they changed me. But they did not sustain me. What sustained me was the practice of showing up even when nothing happened. That was faith in its purest form, not the faith that moves mountains, the faith that sits with the mountain and refuses to leave. I began to keep a practice that became my anchor in the storm. Each morning, before the day began, I would sit in silence for 10 minutes. I did not try to achieve anything. I did not try to feel anything. I simply sat with my spine straight and my hands resting on my knees and my eyes closed. I breathed in and thought, God. I breathed out and thought, I trust. That is all. God, I trust. Some mornings I felt peace. Some mornings I felt nothing but the ache in my back and the itch in my nose and the endless stream of distractions that paraded through my mind. But I stayed. I kept my appointment. And over time, something in me began to change. Not because the practice gave me answers, but because it gave me a place to stand. It gave me a rhythm that held me when my emotions could not. It trained my heart to recognize that God's presence is not contingent on my feelings. He is there whether I sense Him or not. And my job is not to summon Him. My job is to remember Him, to return to Him, to orient my attention toward Him again and again like a compass needle finding north. This is the great secret of the spiritual path. We do not need extraordinary experiences. We need ordinary faithfulness. We need the discipline to sit in silence when silence feels like death. We need the courage to keep praying when prayer feels like talking to the ceiling. We need the humility to admit that we do not understand, that we cannot see the whole picture, that we are stumbling in the dark with only the faintest light to guide us. And we need to trust that this faint light is enough, that God is in the faintness, that the dark night of the soul is not abandonment but initiation. It is the stripping away of everything false, everything conditional, everything that depended on feeling good or having clarity or receiving immediate answers. And what remains, after everything else is burned away, is the bedrock of faith. The faith that says, I do not know what comes next, but I know who holds the next moment, and that is enough. Here is what I ask you to do. Tonight, find a quiet place. Sit with your back straight and your hands open. Close your eyes and take 3 slow breaths. Do not try to fix anything. Do not try to figure anything out. Simply feel your body in the chair, your feet on the ground, the air moving in and out of your lungs, and then say, quietly or silently, God, I am here. Say it 3 times. Let the words be simple and sincere. If you feel nothing, that is fine. Say them anyway. This is not about generating emotion. This is about building a bridge between your will and your faith. Do this every night for 1 week. Just 3 breaths, just 3 repetitions. Let it be small and manageable. Let it be a promise you can keep, because faith grows not in giant leaps but in tiny, faithful steps. And each step you take, even in the dark, is heard. Each choice to show up even when you do not feel like it is honored. You are not alone in this. You never were. I offer you this aphorism born from my own descent. The dark night does not mean God has left. It means He is teaching you to see without the light you once needed. Your fall is not failure. It is the deepening of your trust. Stay where you are. Keep your place. The dawn you cannot yet see is already on its way. Here is where everything turns, where the path narrows and becomes clear. I learned through years of stumbling and rising that faith is not what I feel, but what I keep. It is not the emotion that rises in moments of ecstasy or desperation. It is the daily choice to place God first, even when my heart is numb, even when my circumstances scream that He has forgotten me. The world teaches us to follow our feelings and call it authenticity. I learned the opposite. I learned that feelings are like weather, changing hour by hour, and if I build my spiritual life on them, I will be forever at their mercy. What I needed was not more inspiration. What I needed was discipline, not the harsh discipline of punishment, but the loving discipline of order. The discipline that says, I will show up for God before I show up for anything else, and in that showing up, my life will find its center. This is what I began to practice and what transformed everything. Each morning, before the sun had fully risen, before the noise of the city reached my door, I would sit in the corner of my room and light a single candle. I would place my hands on my knees, palms open, and I would simply be still. 7 minutes, that is all. 7 minutes of silence, where I did not pray elaborate prayers or recite long passages of Scripture. I simply breathed and brought my attention to the presence that is always here, waiting beneath the noise. I would breathe in and think, here. I would breathe out and think, I am. Here, I am. Present to this moment, present to this breath, present to the one who holds all moments and all breaths. Some mornings were easy. The silence felt like a warm embrace, and I could sense the nearness of God like a friend sitting beside me. Other mornings were hard. My mind raced with worries and plans. My body fidgeted. My heart felt dry as desert sand. But I stayed. I kept my appointment. Because this practice was not about what I got from it. It was about what I gave. I was giving God my attention. I was saying, with my body and my time, you are first. Before the world makes its demands, before I scatter myself in 1,000 directions, I give you these 7 minutes. And in that giving, something shifted. Not always immediately, but over weeks and months, I noticed a change. The chaos inside me began to settle. The constant noise of anxiety and striving began to quiet. I was no longer at the mercy of my moods. I had an anchor, I had a rhythm, I had a place to return to when everything else felt uncertain. But silence alone was not enough. I needed to bring order into my daily life, to let the discipline of my inner world extend into the outer world. I began with the smallest possible act. Each morning, after my 7 minutes of silence, I would make my bed, slowly, with attention, smoothing each wrinkle, arranging each pillow, as if this simple task were a prayer. It sounds absurd, I know. What does making a bed have to do with spiritual transformation? Everything. Because when I made my bed with care, I was saying, I can be trusted with my own life. I am not a victim of chaos. I am a steward of order. This one small act became a messenger that traveled through my entire day. If I could bring order to my bed, I could bring order to my thoughts. If I could complete one simple task with reverence, I could approach every task as sacred. The bed was not the point. The point was the training of attention, the cultivation of presence, the refusal to live on autopilot. I was learning to inhabit my life instead of sleepwalking through it. And then there was the practice of gratitude and service. Each evening, before I slept, I would write 3 specific things I was grateful for. Not grand, abstract blessings, specific, concrete moments, the warmth of bread in my hands, the sound of rain on the roof, the way a student's face lit up when he understood a difficult concept. 3 things, every night. This was not about denying suffering or pretending life was easy. It was about training my eyes to see what was actually there, not just what was missing. Because the heart that only sees lack will always be empty, no matter how much it receives. But the heart that learns to see gift, even in small things, begins to overflow. And once a week, I would perform one act of service that no one knew about. I would leave food for a beggar without waiting for thanks. I would mend a torn curtain in the mosque when no one was watching. I would write a note of encouragement to someone I barely knew and leave it where they would find it. These acts were not grand, they were tiny, but they taught me something essential. Love is not a feeling, it is an action. It is the choice to give when I do not feel like giving, to serve when I do not feel inspired, to bless when I myself feel empty. And in the giving, I found that I was filled, not with what I gave away, but with something that came through me as I gave. The presence of God moves through open hands. Closed hands, no matter how full they appear, hold only death. These 3 practices became my foundation. Silence in the morning, one small act of order. Gratitude and service in the evening. They were not impressive. They were not mystical. But they were effective. They took the abstract idea of putting God first and made it concrete. They gave my faith a body, hands, feet, and over time, I noticed that the rest of my life began to align. Choices that once paralyzed me became clearer. Relationships that were toxic fell away without drama. Work that had felt burdensome began to feel like vocation. Money, which had been a source of constant anxiety, found its proper place as a tool, not a master. I was not living perfectly, but I was living intentionally. And intention, sustained over time, becomes transformation. The discipline was not a burden I carried. It became the structure that held me, the trellis that allowed my life to grow in the right direction instead of sprawling in chaos. Let me be clear about something. This is not about earning God's love. You already have that. It is not about becoming worthy. You already are. This is about alignment. This is about bringing your daily life into harmony with the deepest truth of who you are, which is a beloved child of the divine. When you place God first in your attention, when you order your inner and outer world with care, you are not trying to impress Him. You are simply removing the obstacles that keep you from experiencing His constant presence. He has never moved. You have been too scattered to notice Him. But when you gather yourself, when you become still and intentional, you realize He has been here all along, waiting in the silence, present in the ordinary, speaking through the very structure of a life lived with love and attention. So here is what I ask you to do, starting tonight. Before you sleep, prepare for tomorrow. Set out a glass of water by your bed. When you wake, before you check your phone or your messages or your worries, sit on the edge of your bed and drink that water slowly. Feel it in your mouth, down your throat, into your body. This is presence. This is being here, now, alive. Then sit for just 5 minutes. Breathe. Say quietly, God be first in me today. That is all. Then make your bed. One small act of order. And tonight, before you sleep again, write down 3 things you were grateful for. Do this for 7 days, just 7. Let it be simple. Let it be doable. And watch what happens. Not miracles, not dramatic shifts, but a slow steadying, a quiet strengthening, a sense that you are no longer drifting but rooted. This is how transformation happens, not in lightning strikes, but in faithful dailiness. I give you this truth that changed my life. Where you place your order, God places His peace. The chaos you feel is not who you are. It is what happens when you have no center. But you can build a center. You can create sacred rhythms. You can train your heart to remember what it already knows, which is that you are held, you are loved, you are never alone. Discipline is not your enemy. It is the doorway to freedom. And on the other side of that door, God is waiting, as He has always waited, for you to come home to yourself. The change did not announce itself with trumpets. There was no day when I woke and felt suddenly healed, suddenly whole, suddenly free of every burden I had carried. That is not how transformation works. It works the way dawn works, slowly, imperceptibly, until you look up and realize the darkness has given way to light, and you cannot pinpoint the exact moment it happened. I simply noticed, after months of faithful practice, that something in me had shifted. The anxiety that once gripped my chest each morning had loosened its hold. The thoughts that used to circle like vultures, picking at every fear and doubt, had grown quieter. Not silent, but no longer deafening. I could hear myself think. I could hear my own heart, and beneath the noise of my mind, I could hear the steady, quiet pulse of God's presence, like a drumbeat I had been too distracted to notice before. I was not a different person. I was the same person, but gathered, collected, no longer scattered across 1,000 worries and desires. I had come home to myself, and in coming home to myself, I had come home to Him. The first sign was in the mornings. I woke without dread. For years, waking had been a small violence, a return to consciousness that brought with it the immediate weight of everything I had to do, everyone I had to be, all the ways I might fail. But now, there was space. I would open my eyes and feel the softness of the blanket, see the pale light coming through the window, hear the distant call of birds, and I would simply be present to it, grateful for it. Before the day made its demands, there was this moment of peace, and I had learned to inhabit it instead of rushing past it. This was not a miracle. This was the fruit of discipline. I had trained my heart to meet the morning with silence instead of panic, and the morning had responded by offering me its quiet gifts. The water I drank slowly, the 5 minutes of breathing, The simple prayer, God be first in me today. These small acts had created a foundation, and the foundation held me even when the day brought difficulty. The second sign was in my relationships. I noticed that I was less reactive, less defensive, less desperate for approval or validation. When someone criticized me, I could hear the words without immediately collapsing into shame or flaring into anger. I could consider whether there was truth in what they said, take what was useful, and release what was not. When someone praised me, I could receive it with gratitude without clinging to it, without building my identity on their approval. I'd found a center that did not depend on the opinions of others. This center was the place inside me where God dwelt, the place I returned to each morning in silence, the place that remained steady even when everything around me shifted. I was no longer a leaf blown by every wind. I was rooted. And from that rootedness, I could love more freely, speak more honestly, forgive more easily. Not because I was trying to be a better person, but because I had become more fully myself, and my true self was made of love, not fear. The third sign was in my work. Tasks that had once felt burdensome began to feel like offerings. I taught not to impress my students, but to serve them. I wrote not to build my reputation, but to share what had been given to me. I moved through my days with a sense of purpose that was quiet and steady, not frantic or striving. I no longer needed to prove myself. I no longer needed to be the smartest person in the room, or the most spiritual, or the most anything. I could simply be present, do the work in front of me, and trust that God would use it as He saw fit. And in that trust, I found a kind of ease I had never known. The work still required effort, but the effort was no longer exhausting. It flowed from a deeper source, a source that did not run dry because it was not my own strength I was drawing on. It was His. Money stopped being a source of fear. I had spent years worrying about provision, counting every coin, anxious about the future. But as I practiced placing God first, as I ordered my days around His presence rather than my panic, I noticed that what I needed came. Not in excess, not in the dramatic abundance promised by false teachers, but enough, always enough. I learned to distinguish between need and want, and I found that my needs were simpler than I had believed. Bread, water, a roof, companionship, work that mattered. These came, sometimes in unexpected ways, but they came, and I learned to receive them with gratitude instead of greed, to hold them lightly instead of clutching them in fear. The spiritual life is not about accumulation. It is about trust, and when I trusted God with my provision, He proved Himself trustworthy, not always in the way I expected, but always in the way I needed. The signs were everywhere once I learned to see them. A stranger's kindness at the right moment, a sudden clarity about a decision I had been agonizing over, the way a difficult situation resolved itself without my forcing or manipulating. These were not coincidences. They were the visible evidence of an invisible order, the way God's hand moves in the world when we align ourselves with His will. I am not saying that life became easy. I am saying it became coherent. The pieces began to fit together. The path began to reveal itself, one step at a time. I did not need to see the whole road. I only needed to see the next step, and the next step was always there, lit by the poor small light of faith and discipline. People began to notice. They would say, "Jalaluddin, what has changed in you? You seem different, calmer, more joyful." And I would smile and tell them the truth. I am not doing anything extraordinary. I am simply showing up. I am sitting in silence each morning. I am bringing small acts of order into my day. I am practicing gratitude and service. I am placing God first, not as a grand spiritual gesture, but as a daily, humble choice. And that choice has changed everything. They would look at me with skepticism or hunger, and I would say, "You can do this too." It is not reserved for mystics or saints. It is the path for anyone willing to take it. Start small. Start where you are. Start today. And be faithful. Let constancy carry what emotion cannot. I learned these truths in my own flesh, and I offer them to you now. When I ordered my soul, life ordered itself. Silence became my teacher. When I put God first, fear lost its throne. These are not slogans. They are the map I followed out of darkness into light, out of chaos into peace. They are the way I learned to live not as a victim of circumstance, but as a participant in grace. And they are available to you. Not someday. Now. The life you long for is not far away. It is here, waiting for you to claim it, with small, faithful acts repeated until they become the ground you stand on. Here is your practice for this season. Each morning for the next 40 days, set a glass of water by your bed before you sleep. When you wake, sit on the edge of your bed and drink it slowly. Then sit in silence for 5 minutes, hand on your heart, breathing. Say, God, be first in me. Make your bed. Write 3 gratitudes each night, 1 small act of service each week. 40 days. Let the rhythm carry you. Let the discipline become the trellis your life grows on, and watch, not for dramatic signs, but for the quiet unfolding of a peace you cannot manufacture, a strength you do not have to force, a love that rises from a source deeper than your own heart. This is the sign, not thunder, but the steady, gentle knowing that you are held, you are guided, you are never walking alone. I give you this wisdom born from practice. What constancy builds, emotion cannot destroy. Let your faith be your rhythm, not your feeling. And in that rhythm you will find the transformation you seek. I stand here now, after years of wandering and returning, of falling and rising, of losing my way and finding it again in the most unexpected places, and I can tell you with certainty, the peace you seek is not at the end of a long journey. It is here, in this moment, in this breath, waiting for you to stop running and simply receive it. I did not find peace by solving all my problems, or understanding all my questions, or healing all my wounds. I found peace by learning to be present to what is, by placing God first in my attention, by building small rhythms of faithfulness that held me when nothing else could. The storms still come, the losses still arrive, the nights still grow dark, but I am no longer swept away by them. I have an anchor. I have a center. I have learned the discipline of the heart, which is not the suppression of feeling, but the training of attention, the daily choice to return to the source, even when I cannot see him, even when I cannot feel him, even when everything in me wants to scatter and flee. This is what I have learned, and what I offer you as my final word. Pain did not destroy me. It refined me. It burned away what was false and left what was true. The silence I once feared as abandonment became the place where I met God most intimately. He was not in the noise. He was not in the dramatic answers or the miraculous interventions. He was in the quiet persistence of my own breath, in the stubborn grace that kept my heart beating even when I wanted to give up, in the way the morning light fell through my window, whether I noticed it or not. God never moved. I moved in circles, chasing after consolation and certainty, until my circles became a path, and the path brought me back to the simple truth that has been true from the beginning. He is here. He has always been here. My job is not to find him. My job is to remember him, to turn my attention toward him, to let his presence shape the way I live each ordinary day. The lesson is this: you do not need to wait for perfect conditions to begin your spiritual life. You do not need to feel inspired or healed or worthy. You need only to begin where you are with what you have, which is this breath and this moment and this choice. Start with 7 minutes of silence. Start with 1 act of order. Start with 3 gratitudes written at the end of the day. Start small and stay faithful. Let the practice carry you when your emotions cannot. Let the rhythm become the ground beneath your feet. And trust that God honors every faithful step, every sincere attempt, every time you show up, even when you do not feel like showing up. He is not counting your failures. He is holding your willingness. And your willingness is enough. It has always been enough. I learned that waiting is not wasting. The seasons I spent in silence, wondering if anything was changing, wondering if God was even listening, were not empty. They were preparation. I was being hollowed out so I could hold more. I was being stripped of false securities so I could find the true security. I was learning to trust not my own understanding, but his guidance, which comes not in grand revelations, but in the small, clear knowing that arises when I am still enough to hear it. The silence taught me that absence is sometimes God's deepest form of presence, that He withdraws what I can see so I can learn to trust what I cannot see. And in learning to trust, I became free from the tyranny of my own thoughts, free from the need to control outcomes, free to live each day as an act of love instead of a strategy for survival. Here is the practice I give you, the one that holds everything together. Tonight, before you sleep, place a glass of water by your bed. Sit for 3 minutes with your hand on your heart. Breathe slowly. Say, God be first in me. Let this be your prayer, your anchor, your declaration of intent. In the morning, before you do anything else, drink that water slowly. Feel it. Taste it. Let it remind you that you are alive, that you are here, that this day is a gift. Then make your bed. One small act of order that says, I can be trusted with my own life. Write 3 specific gratitudes each evening. Perform 1 act of service each week, something small and secret that no one but God will see. Do this for 40 days, not to earn anything, not to achieve anything, but to create a structure, a rhythm, a path you can walk when you do not know where you are going. Let constancy carry you. Let discipline become love made visible. And watch as your life begins to align, not with your plans, but with a deeper order, a truer purpose, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, but on the unshakable presence of God at the center of everything you do. Do not ask for miracles, ask for silence, and in the silence, listen. God is there. He is waiting. He has always been waiting, not to judge you, not to punish you, but to welcome you home. Home to yourself, home to the truth of who you are beneath all the noise and striving and fear. You are His beloved. You have always been His beloved, and nothing you have done or failed to do can change that. The only question is whether you will believe it, whether you will live as if it is true, whether you will let that truth reshape everything. If this message has resonated in your soul, if you feel the call to walk this path of transformation and awakening, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and be part of this journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who have chosen the path of true transformation, for those who are ready to stop running and start becoming. And I ask you to do one more thing. Leave in the comments these words: God is first and I am beginning. This simple declaration is not just for me or for others. It is for you. It is the moment you mark in time and say, here is where I stop circling and start walking. Here is where I stop waiting for perfect conditions and start with what I have. Here is where I choose faith over fear, presence over panic, love over control. Say it. Write it. Let it become the seed from which your new life grows. I bless you with this final truth, the one that saved me and will save you if you let it. Where God is first, nothing essential comes last. The life you long for is not beyond your reach. It is in your hands, waiting for you to shape it with small, faithful choices. You are not alone in this. I walk with you. God walks with you. And the path, though narrow, is lit with a light that will not fail. Go in peace. Begin today. And trust the one who has never stopped believing in you. Today, do not ask for miracles. Ask for silence and listen. There, God awaits you.